Can you live your entire life in the holodeck? And would it be worth it? That's the question we'll look at this time on The Sci-Fi Show. The holodeck is a piece of technology in the Star Trek Next Generation universe. It's used for recreation and training purposes, and it'd certainly be fun to have access to one. The fun O'Brien and Bashir have in Quark's holosuite is very appealing, replaying the Battle of Britain and other things. I'm sure the military would love such technology, as a better technology for training could hardly be imagined. Interestingly, the US Army does spend considerable amounts of money attempting to develop as realistic simulations as possible for exactly these sorts of training purposes. The holodeck is not without its hazards, and it's a piece of technology that seems to fail with disturbing regularity, endangering the lives of Starfleet officers and even sometimes endangering the ships themselves. The payoff for the technology must greatly outweigh its almost comical unreliability. There have been a large number of Star Trek storylines that centre on the technology of the holodeck, and similar technologies have turned up in other pieces of science fiction, although usually they exist as mental simulations, such as in Stargate or the Matrix films, rather than artificial worlds that a user interacts with. Either way, the technologies generally have common features that mean that users are in real jeopardy when something goes wrong with the technology, although in normal operation the technology is essentially safe. The problems associated with standard uses of the holodeck have also been explored in a number of different episodes. Consider the character of Reg Barclay, a shy, nervous man that managed to gain a commission in Starfleet. Reg uses the holodeck to escape from the pressures of everyday life and builds a fantasy world where he is the hero of the piece, strong, dashing and courageous. Everything is not in everyday life. In Holo Pursuits, the 21st episode from Season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation, we find Reg enjoying himself in the holodeck with a fantasy that includes senior members of the crew rendered in less intimidating forms for Reg to interact with. The episode deals with Reg's inability to function in real life and his addiction to this better but artificial life that he has found inside the holodeck. But are we sure real life is better than this world Reg has created for himself? Who can't understand the appeal of a world where you always win, but more importantly a world where all the things that scare you were removed or muted into forms that you can cope with? If you remember back to the first episode of this season, Rocky Valentine found himself trapped in his own personal hell, where he was always the winner and everything was easy. But for Reg Barclay, a man that is terrified of the dangers and threats of the everyday world, perhaps a fantasy world he can deal with would be preferable. Perhaps it would become hellish over time, but unlike Rocky, Reg can always choose to leave his fantasy world and come back to the real world. Or can he? It would seem that living in the real world offers something that no amount of fantasy life could replace, but the sense of achievement and success that can be experienced in a virtual world might be enough. There is a question of real companionship, and synthetic holodeck friends that in a real sense are just made up and always able to be gotten along with are going to somehow be lacking ultimately for friendship, although even that could be compensated for and a collection of friends could live in the holodeck instead of just a solitary individual. So why not prefer life in the holodeck, where there are safeties from stopping anything getting too real, but where all the adventure you can hope for is available just for the programming? Even if it's not enough, they can always disable the safeties and make it a bit more real. The political philosopher Robert Nozick, in his work Anarchy, Utopia and State, spoke of an experience machine that promises the same basic deal as life in the holodeck, although it's a bit more like the life offered by the Matrix. Nozick offered the experience machine as a critique of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is an ethical system that seeks to maximize some variable, usually human pleasure or happiness, so as to have the greatest amount of it, and this is seen as the highest possible good. Utilitarianism is an interesting idea and one that we'll look at in more detail in a future episode, but Nozick's experience machine, and by extension the holodeck, does provide an interesting counterexample to the utilitarian's ethical framework. Surely a world where everybody's wildest fantasies and dreams can be made into a reasonable approximation of reality would be the world where everybody would be maximally happy. Nozick suggests you go one step further and just hook people up so that they simply experience non-stop ecstatic pleasure. I think Nozick envisaged some sort of drug experience, but it would seem that the holodeck provides something similar, and probably even more compelling as an experience, because it can provide an enormous variety of experience and could provide a very convincing substitute for living in the real world, with all the hard edges sanded down and padded, so that you could never really hurt yourself. I'm sure some people would find this appealing as long as they knew they could leave. I wonder how many would. I wonder after a time if some would even remember. So what would you choose? Nozick offered some reasons for going into the experience machine and some reasons for staying out. The basic argument for going in is the idea that the utilitarians are correct. That pleasure is the most important thing and the highest good. As we'll maximize pleasure by entering the machine, then it is the morally sound choice. However, Nozick offers several defeaters for this argument. Nozick offers 3 arguments for not getting into the machine. The first of these is simple enough and applies to the holodeck as well. We want to have certain experiences and not just have the experience of having certain experiences. That a safe simulation of an experience is not the same thing as having the real thing. This also suggests the basic problem with Total Recall's recall service that provides you with the memory of the vacation of a lifetime without all that messy going on vacation bit. Perhaps this objection can be answered though, at least with the holodeck. After all, you can, as Bellana Torres did in Extreme Risk, disable the holodeck safeties and experience a genuinely life-threatening experience in the holodeck, an experience that presumably mirrors the actual danger of doing the real thing. I suppose it isn't a perfect replica because you can always end the program before it gets completely out of hand, unlike in real life, but it certainly would be closer. I guess this raises the question, if I climb Everest in the holodeck with the safeties disabled, and no way out until I've ascended and descended the summit successfully, is that any less of an accomplishment than travelling to Nepal and doing this real thing? The level of jeopardy is the same, although it still feels like it would somehow not really be the same experience, although probably an excellent training aid for the real thing. Nozick offers 2 more profound critiques that I don't think can be as easily rebutted. The first of these is that we want to be a particular sort of human being, and he observed that someone floating in a tank is just an indeterminate blob. That does seem a reasonable critique. There seems to be something profoundly subhuman about just being wired into the experience machine, getting as much pleasure as possible. Even if we switch to the holodeck or one of Quark's saucier holosuite programs, I'm not sure that changes. You will still just be a subhuman thing experiencing endless pleasure, even assuming it didn't get boring. Even with some sort of limited challenge and accomplishment, it still seems somehow less than fully human. Although I suspect given the option, some would choose this lesser existence that ultimately robs them of their humanity and offers at best a hollow substitute. For some, it might sadly be enough. In a slightly disturbing parallel, it does remind me of the men who seek relationships with lifelike sex bots and other things as a substitute for female companionship. Apparently this sort of thing is popular in Japan, that source of all things weird. I'll put a link in the show notes to an interesting discussion of the idea I read and participated in on the blog Sunshine Mary and the Dragon. I'd be interested to know what others make of it. Are men who go for such things dehumanizing themselves? Nozick's third objection isn't obvious, but it's probably the most profound of his reasons not to use the experience machine, and it definitely applied to the holodeck as real-world substitute. He observed that it has no actual contact with any deeper reality, though the experience of it can be simulated. One limitation of the holodeck is that it can never offer an experience that cannot be anticipated or imagined, although it can fake any one that can be imagined. It strikes me as a really profound insight. What if there is a deeper spiritual dimension to the universe and life? You'll miss out on all of this in the safety of the holodeck or the experience machine. The holodeck can fake your meeting with and experiencing anything you wish to, but like poor Rocky Valentine in his own personal hell, surely a life of pure wish fulfillment with no challenge would eventually wear thin and be unlivable. Perhaps in the horizon of a human lifetime it might be enough anyway, and you would never exhaust everything that a life of wish fulfillment could offer. But the rampant drug abuse, depression and suicide of celebrities and the otherwise extremely rich suggests that there is more to life than wish fulfillment. Also, if Aristotle is right, then friends are an important component to life, and any relationship with a holodeck character is just a facsimile. It was sad to watch Geordie LaForge fall in love with the holodeck imitation of Dr. Leah Brahms, and the awkwardness that went along with later meeting her. Perhaps the holodeck could be perfect after all, if you had some complete friends to share it with, or perhaps that would just forestall the inevitable. So would you choose it? Would this life of safety and pleasure be enough for you, or does life require risk and danger to be worth it? You can find more information on the different ideas contained in this episode in the show notes on sci-fi-show.com. I can be reached with comments via the sci-fi-show@gmail.com, and you can leave comments in the show notes at sci-fi-show.com, or leave comments on our Facebook page, facebook.com/sci-fi-show. You can also follow the show via the Sci-Fi Show on Twitter. If it's a topic you'd like me to look into, please don't hesitate to ask. And don't forget, it's Fi with a PH. Let me know what you think. The Sci-Fi Show is recorded under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 3.0 license, and the music is provided by Furious J and Maniacal M.